Hey y'all, it's Chrisio here from the Chrisio Clucky Chronicles and ChrisioShow.com. And howdy y'all folks, welcome back to another finger-licking good episode of Chrisio's Clucky Chronicles right here on my Southern Farm Stories playlist. So just to let y'all know, I'm Chrisio. I'm your Clucky companion from the heart of Eastern North Carolina. You know, this the land of the sweet tea, and it flows like the Tar River, and the chickens strut around like they own the place, which pretty much they do. But anyway, let's just be honest, they all do. Any kind of floof you got, chickens, ducks, quails, it doesn't matter, turkeys, they all strut around like they own the place. Anyway, I digress. So today we're diving into a tale that's as rich as Grandma's buttermilk biscuits, y'all. We're talking about the simple life, long before them big old franchise chains like Walmart showed up and turned shopping into a sprint. Okay? So we're just going to be talking about how folks in Eastern North Carolina got their groceries, their goods and supplies way back in the day. And mostly they did it through good old-fashioned trading, bartering, and community smarts, okay? So we're just going to mosey through the decades from the 1900s right up till today, highlighting how we shifted from that hardy, hands-on life to this Insta society where everything's fast, cheap, and forgettable. But don't fret, because I'm putting a positive spin on all this, y'all. I just want to show y'all why getting back to our roots ain't just nostalgic. It's going to be downright essential for helping ourselves and our neighbors thrive in years to come. So, let's jump into this. So, just picture this, okay? Just picture me sitting on my front porch swing with my flock, pecking around, you know, we're sipping on some sweet tea and just yarning about good old days. So I'm going to keep this factual, educational, and I'm going to sprinkle it with a dash of fun farm stories to keep you clucking along, okay? It's not going to be boring. So that's what I'm going to do. So you got plenty of time to grab you a snacky from your own garden if you're feeling inspired, or whatever you got in your house you want to just chaw on. Get you a little drink, sweet tea, a little coffee. Let's hop in a time machine and let's start at the turn of the century. Now, the 1900s, we're going to talk about barter, buggies, and backyard bounty. That just makes sense to me, right? So let's just go on ahead and rewind. Let's go on back, pretend we're in the early 1900s, when Eastern North Carolina was a patchwork of backer fields and cotton patches and piney woods just stretching from the Outer Banks all the way to the Piedmont's edge, okay? So life back then, it was simple, self-reliant, and slower than a snail on a Sunday stroll. Now, folks didn't have no Walmart. They didn't have no proper supermarkets. And, hey, I mean, the first real grocery chain in North Carolina was Pender Stores, and that popped up in, like, the 1900s. You know, that was down in Norfolk, you know. But it was tiny, and mostly it just served bigger towns, you know. Anyway, and then it popped up around and served towns like Wilmington, New Bern, that kind of stuff. And they were also, you know, there was different things like in rural spots, like in Pitt County or Beaufort, where, you know, there was just shopping, just meant relying on what you grew, you raised, or you traded. That's basically what it was, okay? So imagine during this time frame, you're waking up at dawn, you're milking the cow, you're gathering your eggs from your hens, and, you know, you're just heading out to the garden to get your veggies, to get your food, literally. Because families back then in the 1900s, they were all homestead heroes. They canned peaches in the summer, cured hams in the smokehouses, and they baked bread from flour ground at their own local mills. Now, for what you couldn't make yourself, well, that's where the magic of trading kicked in, y'all. Barter was king back then. A farmer might swap like a bushel of corn for a neighbor's fresh butter, or they might trade eggs for fabric at the general store. So these general stores were like the heartbeat of the communities. Little wooden shacks, they were stocked with basics like flour, sugar, coffee, and tools. Now you'd find them in places like Aden or Farmville, and they were run by folks who knew your name, but they also knew your tab. Trading wasn't just about goods. It built bonds. In eastern North Carolina, with our rivers and railroads starting to connect us to other markets, like even Virginia markets, folks traded naval stores, like pine tar and turpentine. Now, from the vast forest for hardware and cloth, well, they did that too. They traded. Now, during the early 1900s, after the Civil War scars faded a bit, all different farmers of all shades alike leaned on this system, especially since cash was scarcer than hen's teeth, you know what I mean, post-Reconstruction. So it taught skills. It's what everybody needed. You had to have skills. Cooking from scratch meant knowing how to turn a hog into a feast. Gardening meant fighting off boll weevils without fancy sprays. And homesteading meant fixing your own plow. No waste. Everything had a purpose and a place, from scraps from the pigs to quilts from old cloths. Now, this was all educational, but it was in the best way. Kids actually learned by doing, because you were passing down know-how that kept families fed through lean times. But as the decades rolled on, there was like hints of change that were whispering in. You got railroads, they bringing more goods from afar, and by 1910, some towns saw specialty shops. Now, a butcher here, a dry goods merchant there, they were popping up different places. Now, we're still trading at this time, because trading ruled the roost. Fostering community spirit where helping a neighbor meant you'd eat come to wintertime, and that made a big difference. Now let's fast forward to the roaring 20s, and eastern North Carolina just was jazzing up a tad. Well, they were jazzing up as much as our dirt roads allowed it to. You had the Great War was finally over. Cars were starting to chug in thanks to Henry Ford's affordable Model T. And then you got folks started dreaming bigger. But rural life, yeah, still rooted in simple swap. Groceries, typical shopping trip meant visiting multiple spots. You had the grocer for dry goods like beans and flour, the butcher for meat, and maybe the fishmonger if you lived near the coast like Morehead City. No one-stop shops, on that yet. All that one-stop shop stuff, that's coming later. So trading, well, that evolved with the times. With better roads, you got it linking us to places like Norfolk, Raleigh, and all these other bigger areas. Farmers, they hauled produce to markets or traded directly at county fairs. And in places like Wilson, tobacco auctions were big, and folks were bartering leaf for actual supplies. Community, though, that was key, because co-ops started forming. So where farmers pooled resources to buy seeds or equipment in bulk, it started making a big difference. But the 1920s also saw the first whispers of like chain stores. You got stores like Pender, and they were expanded into colonial stores. They are offering more variety in towns. But still, in the sticks, general stores, they were thriving. They were accepting eggs or chickens, yes, like my Nana Roo chicken. They were accepting that as payment. So skills, they actually shone bright. Because let me tell you, women preserved jars of okra, tomatoes, and all types of other things. Men built barns from local lumber. Cooking was an art form, think now. Collards simmered with ham hock, all from the homestead, just good stuff. But the stock market crash loomed, and it was reminding everyone at that time that self-reliance just wasn't for fun, it was for survival. Now, the 1930s, well, that Great Depression, it hit eastern North Carolina like a hurricane. Tobacco prices plummeted, you got farms foreclosed, and cash just vanished faster than dew in July. But guess what saved us? That old barter system ramped up. Folks was trading more than ever. A mechanic fixed your tractor for a side of pork, or you'd swap garden veggies for linen clothes. In rural counties like Lenore Green, community trading networks, they just exploded. Neighbors were sharing milk, eggs, and even labor for harvesting. You got general stores. Those were becoming the lifelines, and they became the lifelines back then. They were extending credit or accepting barter and trade when Uncle Sam's relief was real slow. Now, the New Deal brought us some help, like rural electrification. But homestead skills, let me tell you, that was the real heroes. Gardening booms, victory gardens, before they were called that, with families growing everything from sweet taters to squash. They were gardening. Everything. Cooking, they had to learn to stretch the meals. So cornbread from homegrown meal, and then making soups from scraps. That was the thing. Now, was it educational? Daggone right it was. Absolutely it was. Because back then, schools taught home economics, and they emphasized these skills and self-reliance. Now, trading, that fostered resilience as well. It wasn't just economic, it was also social. Because folks in eastern North Carolina, with our mix of sharecroppers and yeoman farmers, they had to lean on each other, built friendships, built bonds, and that really outlasted the hard times. Now, as we roll into the 1940s and World War II, this turned everything upside down. Rationing books ruled, sugar, coffee, and meat, all was limited now. It was all limited. But eastern North Carolina folks, let me tell you, we adapted like pros. Homesteading surged. Victory gardens were popping up everywhere, from backyards in Kinston to farms near to Albemarle Sound. People growed their own food to supplement rations, trading surpluses at community markets. Bartering really got creative. So what they were doing is they were swapping canned goods for gasoline stamps or trading eggs for fabric to make uniforms. General stores, they stocked what they could. But then chain stores like A&P started growing. They were offering self-service in bigger towns. But still, rural trading held strong. Farmers exchanged tools or livestock, keeping the communities very tight-knit. Now, skills, hey, they were honed to a fine edge. Cooking meant making do with less. So think, a mock apple pie from crackers. That happened. Gardening, well, that was patriotic. And homestead life meant conserving and saving, making something out of nothing, just conserving everything you had. It taught us back then that trading, it wasn't greed, it was giving back. Now let's talk about the 1950s and 60s and this post-war boom and the birth of big boxes. So you got 1950s, 1960s. This is your post-war prosperity, and it hit eastern North Carolina like a warm breeze. Cars were zooming on new highways. TVs were flickering in living rooms, and supermarkets, well, they started arriving. Colonial stores went big with big star outlets. A&P expanded. Self-service stores meant grabbing carts and loading it up. So in places like Greenville or Rocky Mount, these replaced many of the general stores. They offered pre-packaged goods and a variety. But trading still lingered in rural spots. Farmers markets were thriving. Co-ops grew for buying supplies. Walmart? Well, Sam Walton opened his first one in 1962 in Arkansas, but it trickled east slowly. So homestead skills, they started slipping a little bit because you got refrigerators and frozen foods and less of a need for canning. Cooking got quicker. Gardening, well, that started becoming a little more optional. Yet community trading, it still kept some of those deep roots alive, like swapping fish from the Neuse River for some veggies. So this era is really marking the shift. It's from long-lasting homemade to convenient store-bought. But on a positive note, it freed time. But on the downside, we lost some of our know-how. Now let's move on into the 1970s and 80s, where chains conquered and convenience called. So right now, this is my era. I was born in the 70s. So by the 1970s and 80s, Eastern North Carolina was changing real fast. Walmart exploded. It was opening stores in North Carolina by the mid-70s, offering everything under one roof at a low price. Supermarkets like Food Line started in Salisbury in 1957. It boomed. It just pushed out small grocers. Shopping became a drive to the strip mall, loading up on processed foods. Trading, well, that faded to farmers markets and flea swaps. Homestead life, it was waning. Kids were playing video games instead of planting seeds. Cooking skills dipped with microwaves, and gardening, well, that became more of a hobby. But you still had some of those rural communities, tight-knit ones, they held on. So they had co-ops in place, like what they had in the Outer Banks. In the 1990s and the 2000s, you got super centers and a speedy society. So now when we're in the 1990s and the 2000s, Walmart super centers were dominating. They were adding groceries to the empire. Only shopping hinted at like the future, but still those chains ruled. So in Eastern North Carolina, rural stores started closing up as folks drove to big boxes for cheap deals. And trading, well, that's mostly at CSAs or bartering apps. Those were emerging at the time. Loss of skills, it really accelerated at this point. Fast food over home cooked, that was happening. Store veggies over gardens. You know, we became an insta society. Quick meals, disposable goods. Now in the current trends we're in right now is fast and cheap versus last and legacy. So let's talk about it. Today in 2025, Eastern North Carolina leans heavy on fast and cheap. Drive-thrus, Amazon deliveries, Walmart runs for budget bites. But trends are turning. We got a little bit of sustainable living rising again. Green homes, you got stuff like that in Raleigh and Durham. You got farm to table in Asheville's influencing homesteading revivals. Folks are now starting to crave quality over quantity, and they're fighting back against lost skills. So what's the positive twist? Well, getting back to your roots. It ain't retro, it's revolutionary. Trading locally boosts economies. Garden saves money and health. Got cooking from scratch? Well, that's building bonds, especially if you don't know how to cook, because you're going to seek somebody else that's willing to teach you or show you something. It also helps communities, because now people are swapping seeds with neighbors, they're joining co-ops, and they're trying to reduce their waste. We're rediscovering that self-reliance actually makes us stronger, happier, and kinder. Now, hey, let's cluck about you. Here's some thought-provoking questions and some practical tips to spark that homestead wildfire in maybe you. So, what's one skill from the past you'd love to learn? I think about, what about like canning your own jams? Starting simple with water bath canners and local berries. It's going to save you bucks, and it's going to taste worlds better than the store-bought. Think about that. How often do you trade or share with your neighbors? Think about this. Next time, Swap extra zucchini for some eggs. Join a Facebook barter group or farmer's market. It's fun, and it builds real solid connections. Like, is your grocery list full of fresh or fast? Just challenge yourself. Plant a small little herb garden, even in pots or on a balcony. Basil, tomatoes, they grow easy in eastern North Carolina's climate. Just try to cut your costs a little bit and add flavor to your meals. What's stopping you from doing a homestead habit? Nothing, really. We only stop ourselves. So just think about it. Try one weekly thing from scratch meal, like slow-cooked collards with homegrown greens, a crock pot meal, something. It's cheaper, healthier, and it kind of teaches you patience in our rush, need it now, world. Try it. Also think about this. How can you help your community, your neighbors? If you don't have time to volunteer at a community garden, why don't you start like a tool share group? Something. Do anything. In eastern North Carolina, there's places like Coastal Plain. They got programs. You can get involved for more longer lasting fulfillment. Just remember this. Simple Life ain't gone. It's just waiting in your backyard. That's all. And I want to thank y'all for joining Chrissy O's Clucky Chronicles, subscribing, and follow along. Thank y'all for everything that you do. Thank you for signing up for those monthly email newsletters, reading the blog, all kinds of stuff here. It's all about fun. It's educational. We have a good time here. Now, I want y'all just go plant something. Go trade something and try to live a little bit slower. All right, y'all. Until next time, I want you to keep it clucking and trucking. And if you can't be good, I don't know what else to tell you other than to be good at it.